The hearing room was packed, every seat filled, cameras lined against the back wall like soldiers at attention, their red recording lights blinking in unison. The air conditioning struggled against the body heat of over 200 people crammed into a space designed for half that number. Reporters whispered into phones, staffers shuffled papers. Outside in the hallway, overflow crowds watched on monitors, unable to get inside. At the front of the room, behind an elevated mahogany bench that curved like a judicial altar, sat the members of the Senate Banking Committee. Nameplates gleamed under the overhead lights. The chairman, Senator Harold Brennan, a silver-haired Republican from Tennessee, sat dead center, his gavel resting within easy reach. To his right and left, the committee members arranged themselves in descending order of seniority, Democrats on one side, Republicans on the other. But all eyes were on one person, Senator Graham Allison. The junior senator from Massachusetts sat 4 seats to the chairman's left, her reading glasses perched on her nose, a stack of manila folders spread before her like a poker hand she was about to reveal. At 42, Winters had built a reputation as a meticulous investigator, a former federal prosecutor who'd put away corporate fraudsters and white-collar criminals before running for office. She didn't grandstand. She didn't yell. She simply asked questions, waited for answers, and then produced documents that made those answers look like lies. Today, she was dressed in a navy blazer, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, her expression neutral but focused. She tapped a pen against her notepad in a steady rhythm, like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. Across from the committee, at a small wooden table facing the senators, sat Marcus Hewitt, the president's newly appointed digital assets advisor, the Crypto Czar, as the media had dubbed him. 48 years old, blonde hair slicked back, wearing a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than most Americans made in a month. His tie was silk, his cufflinks gold, his watch Swiss and expensive. He sat with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent his entire life getting away with things. Next to him sat his attorney, a sharp-faced woman in her 50s named Victoria Cross, notorious in Washington for defending the indefensible. She leaned close to Hewitt, whispering something. He nodded, barely listening, his eyes scanning the room like he was at a networking event. Chairman Brennan banged his gavel once, sharp and loud. "This hearing of the Senate Banking Committee will come to order," Brennan announced, his Tennessee drawl softening the edges of his words. "We are here today to examine the role and conduct of Mr. Marcus Hewitt, appointed by the President as Special Advisor on Digital Assets and Blockchain Policy. Mr. Hewitt, thank you for appearing before us today." Hewitt smiled, nodded graciously. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's an honor." "We'll begin with opening statements," Brennan continued. "Mr. Hewitt, you have 5 minutes." Hewitt leaned forward, adjusted the microphone, and launched into a polished speech about innovation, American competitiveness, the future of finance, the importance of clear regulatory frameworks. His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of voice that had pitched venture capitalists and closed billion-dollar deals. He talked about blockchain technology revolutionizing everything, from banking to supply chains. He praised the president's vision. He thanked the committee for their time. It was all very rehearsed, very clean. When he finished, Brennan thanked him and turned to the committee members. "We'll now proceed with questions. Each member will have 7 minutes for the first round. Senator Caldwell, you're recognized." Senator Caldwell, a Republican from Wyoming, started with softballs. Questions about innovation, questions about China's digital currency, questions designed to let Hewitt look competent and visionary. Hewitt answered smoothly, dropping references to decentralization, tokenomics, Web3, the kind of buzzwords that sounded impressive to people who didn't actually understand what they meant. Then it was Senator Liu's turn, a Democrat from Oregon. She pressed a bit harder, asking about consumer protections, fraud prevention, whether Hewitt had any financial ties to crypto companies. Hewitt assured her he'd divested from all holdings, that everything had been cleared by the Office of Government Ethics, that he was here to serve the public interest, not private gain. Liu looked skeptical, but ran out of time before she could dig deeper. Then came Senator Winters. Brennan glanced at the roster, then nodded toward her. "Senator Winters, you're recognized for 7 minutes." Winters didn't smile. She didn't thank anyone. She simply adjusted her glasses, opened the top folder on her stack, and looked directly at Marcus Hewitt. "Mr. Hewitt," she began, her voice calm, almost conversational, "you've told this committee that you divested from all cryptocurrency holdings before assuming your advisory role. Is that correct?" Hewitt nodded immediately. "Yes, Senator, completely. I worked closely with the Office of Government Ethics to ensure full compliance. And you've assured us that you have no financial interest, direct or indirect, in any crypto company or platform. That's correct. No stocks, no tokens, no advisory positions, no consulting agreements, none, Senator." Winters nodded slowly, as if considering this. Then she pulled a single sheet of paper from her folder and slid it across the table toward the stenographer, who marked it as Exhibit A. "Mr. Hewitt, I'm entering into the record a financial disclosure form filed with the Office of Government Ethics on March 14th of this year. That's your signature at the bottom, correct?" Hewitt glanced at his attorney. Cross leaned over, whispered something. Hewitt looked back at Winters. "I believe so. Yes, you believe so, or you know so. That's my signature, Senator." "Good. Now, on page 3 of this form, under the section labeled Divestments and Recusals, you list several cryptocurrency holdings that you sold prior to taking your position. Is that accurate?" "Yes, Senator. As I said, I divested completely." "You divested completely," Winters repeated, her tone flat. She pulled another document from her folder. "I'm now entering Exhibit B. This is a bank statement from Platinum Trust Financial, dated April 9th. Do you bank with Platinum Trust, Mr. Hewitt?" Hewitt shifted slightly in his chair. "I have accounts with several institutions, Senator. I'd have to check specifically." "Well, let me help you. This statement shows an account under your name, account number ending in 7432. Does that sound familiar?" Cross leaned in again, whispering urgently. Hewitt cleared his throat. "I may have an account there. Yes, you may have an account," Winters said, her voice edging toward sarcasm now. "Mr. Hewitt, this isn't a guessing game. Do you or do you not have an account at Platinum Trust ending in 7432? "Yes, Senator, I do. Thank you. Now, on this statement, there's a transaction dated April 9th. A purchase. Would you like to tell the committee what you purchased that day?" Hewitt's jaw tightened. He glanced at Cross again, but she was reading the document Winters had submitted, her face darkening. "Senator, I'd need to review the full context of—" "Let me save you the trouble," Winters interrupted. She leaned forward, her voice sharpening. "On April 9th, you purchased $85,000 worth of stock in a company called Velocity Chain Technologies. Does that name ring a bell?" The room went dead silent. Reporters stopped typing. Staffers froze mid-shuffle. Even Chairman Brennan, who'd been half listening while reading something on his phone, looked up. Hewitt's face had gone pale. "Senator, I'd have to consult my records." "Your records," Winters said coldly. "Mr. Hewitt, Velocity Chain Technologies is one of the largest cryptocurrency mining and exchange platforms in the United States. They've been lobbying your office heavily for favorable regulatory treatment. And according to this bank statement, you bought $85,000 of their stock 5 weeks after you were sworn in as the President's digital assets advisor. Does that sound like no financial interest to you?" Hewitt opened his mouth, then closed it. His attorney put a hand on his arm, but he shook it off. "Senator, that transaction, it was part of a broader portfolio rebalancing. I wasn't specifically targeting that company." "You weren't specifically targeting them," Winters repeated, her tone dripping with disbelief. "Mr. Hewitt, you are the President's top advisor on cryptocurrency policy. Velocity Chain has spent $2 million lobbying your office in the last 6 months. They've hosted you at private dinners, flown you on private jets, and given you access to their executive team. And you want this committee to believe that buying their stock was just a coincidence. Senator, Let me ask you this," Winters cut him off. "When did you buy that stock? What was the exact date?" I believe it was April 9th, as you said." "April 9th, Winters confirmed. She pulled yet another document from her stack. "And what happened on April 10th, Mr. Hewitt?" "The very next day." Hewitt stared at her, his face frozen. "On April 10th, Winters continued, not waiting for an answer, "you issued an advisory memo to the Treasury Department recommending that Velocity Chain and companies like it be exempt from certain reporting requirements under the Bank Secrecy Act, a memo that would save Velocity Chain tens of millions of dollars in compliance costs. You bought their stock, and the next day you gave them a regulatory gift. Explain that to me." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Camera flashes popped like fireworks. Chairman Brennan banged his gavel, but the noise barely subsided. Senator Caldwell leaned into his microphone, trying to object, but his words were lost in the chaos. Hewitt looked like he'd been struck. His attorney was frantically scribbling notes, but Hewitt just sat there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Senator Winters," Brennan finally shouted over the noise, "you're out of time." "Mr. Chairman, I'm just getting started." Winters shot back. "I move to extend my time by 5 minutes. Objection. Objection, Senator Caldwell barked. This is a witch hunt, Mr. Chairman. Senator Winters is assassinating this man's character, with selective document drops and zero context. Zero context. Winters turned to Caldwell, her eyes flashing. Senator, I have bank statements, I have lobbying disclosures, I have internal emails, and I have transaction records. If that's not context, I don't know what is. You're twisting the facts to fit a narrative. Caldwell fired back. Mr. Hewitt has complied with every ethics requirement. He's here voluntarily, answering questions in good faith, and you're treating him like a criminal. If he's got nothing to hide, Winters said icily, then he should have no problem answering my questions. Brennan banged the gavel again. All right, that's enough. Senator Winters, your time is up. We'll take a 5-minute recess. Mr. Hewitt, you're advised to stay in your seat. But Winters wasn't done. She stood up, her voice cutting through the room. Mr. Chairman, I have 3 more exhibits to enter, and I haven't even gotten to the offshore accounts yet. The room exploded again. During the recess, the hallway outside the hearing room turned into a war zone. Reporters swarmed Winters' chief of staff, demanding quotes. Republican operatives accused her of political theater. Democratic staffers leaked documents to friendly journalists. On cable news, the clips were already running. Senator drops bombshell on Crypto Czar. Hewitt caught buying stock. Ethics scandal rocks White House. Inside the hearing room, Hewitt sat hunched over the table, his attorney speaking rapidly into his ear. He looked smaller now, like the suit had grown too big for him. His confidence had evaporated. His polish had cracked. Winters sat calmly in her seat, reviewing her notes. Her chief of staff, a young woman named Maya Ortiz, leaned in close. Senator, they're going to come at you hard when we reconvene, Maya whispered. Caldwell's already talking about calling a point of order. Brennan's getting pressure from leadership. Winters didn't look up. Let them. I've got the receipts. They're saying you're grandstanding, that you're making this political. Maya, he bought stock in a company the day before he gave them a regulatory favor. That's not politics. That's corruption. Maya hesitated. They're saying you're doing this because you're running for president. Winters finally looked up, her eyes hard. Am I running for president? I don't know. Are you? Winters smiled faintly. Not today. Today I'm doing my job. The gavel banged. Recess was over. Brennan called the hearing back to order. The room was still buzzing, but quieter now, like a storm that had passed but left the air charged. We'll continue with Senator Winters' questioning, Brennan said reluctantly. Senator, you have 5 additional minutes. Winters nodded and stood up. She didn't sit back down. She stayed on her feet, looming over the table, a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. Mr. Hewitt, she began, let's talk about your travel. Hewitt blinked. My travel? Yes. Specifically, let's talk about your trip to the Bahamas in May. You remember that trip, don't you? Hewitt glanced at his attorney. Cross was flipping through a binder, clearly trying to find something, anything, to prepare him. I've traveled to the Bahamas on several occasions, Senator, for work and personal reasons. Let me be more specific, Winters said. She pulled out another document. On May 12th, you flew from Washington to Nassau on a private jet registered to Velocity Chain Technologies. The flight manifest lists you and 3 Velocity Chain executives. Does that refresh your memory? Hewitt's face tightened. That was a work trip, Senator. I was meeting with industry leaders to discuss regulatory frameworks. A work trip, Winters repeated. On a private jet owned by the company you'd just bought stock in, the company you'd just given a regulatory favor to. Senator, I didn't own that jet. Velocity Chain offered transportation as a courtesy. It's common practice. Common practice, Winters said flatly. Mr. Hewitt, federal ethics rules prohibit government officials from accepting gifts valued over $50 from entities they regulate or advise on. A private jet flight from D.C. to the Bahamas costs approximately $30,000. Would you like to explain how that's not a gift? Hewitt stammered. I was told by counsel that it fell under official business travel. I was assured it was compliant. You were assured, Winters said. She turned to Cross. Ms. Cross, did you advise Mr. Hewitt that accepting a $30,000 private jet flight was compliant with federal ethics law? Cross didn't answer. She stared straight ahead, her face expressionless. Winters turned back to Hewitt. While you were in the Bahamas, Mr. Hewitt, where did you stay? I stayed at a hotel. Which hotel? Hewitt hesitated. I don't recall the name. You don't recall, Winters said. She pulled out another document, this one with a glossy photo attached. Let me help you. You stayed at the Azure Reef Resort, a 5-star property owned by, guess who? A subsidiary of Velocity Chain Technologies. Your suite cost $4,000 a night. You stayed for 3 nights. Who paid for that, Mr. Hewitt? The room was silent, not a single murmur. Even the reporters had stopped typing. Hewitt's voice was barely a whisper. I believe the company covered the accommodations as part of the conference. The conference, Winters said, her voice rising now. Mr. Hewitt, There was no conference. I've checked. There were no public events, no panels, no registered attendees. It was you, 3 Velocity Chain executives, and a $12,000 hotel bill. That's not a conference. That's a vacation. A vacation paid for by a company you're supposed to be regulating. Hewitt looked at his attorney, his eyes pleading. Cross finally leaned into her microphone. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request a brief recess so my client and I can confer. Denied, Brennan said quickly. Senator Winters has the floor. Winters wasn't finished. She pulled out yet another document, this one thicker, bound with a black clip. Mr. Hewitt, I'm now entering Exhibit F. This is a forensic analysis of blockchain transactions conducted by my office's investigative team. Are you familiar with blockchain forensics? Hewitt didn't answer. Blockchain transactions are public, Mr. Hewitt. Transparent, traceable. Every transaction leaves a permanent record. And according to this analysis, on April 9th, the same day you bought Velocity Chain stock, a cryptocurrency wallet registered under your name received a transfer of $250,000 worth of Velocity Chain tokens from an offshore wallet based in the Cayman Islands. The room exploded again. This time, even Brennan couldn't control it. Senators shouted, staffers scrambled, reporters rushed for the exits to file breaking news. Hewitt's face had gone white. Senator, I don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what I'm talking about. Winter's voice was sharp as a blade now. Mr. Hewitt, this wallet is registered under your email address. The transaction ID is right here. The timestamp matches your stock purchase within 2 hours. You bought their stock, and 2 hours later, you received $250,000 in their tokens from an offshore account. That's not a coincidence. That's a payoff. I never authorized that. I didn't even know that wallet existed. Then who did? Winters demanded. Who set up that wallet? Who transferred those tokens? Who paid you, Mr. Hewitt? Hewitt looked at his attorney, but Cross was staring at the documents, her face pale. She had nothing. Mr. Hewitt, Winters said, her voice dropping to a deadly calm, you came before this committee and swore you had no financial interest in cryptocurrency companies. You lied. You bought stock in a company the day before you gave them a regulatory favor. You accepted tens of thousands of dollars in gifts. You received offshore payments. And now you sit here and tell me you don't know what I'm talking about. Hewitt said nothing. Winters leaned forward, her hands flat on the table. Let me make this very simple for you. You are not a public servant. You are a criminal. And if I have anything to say about it, you will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The room erupted into chaos. Chairman Brennan banged his gavel over and over, but it was useless. Republican senators shouted objections. Democratic senators applauded. Reporters screamed questions. Camera flashes exploded like lightning. And Marcus Hewitt, the crypto czar, sat frozen in his chair, his hands trembling, his face drained of color as the walls closed in around him. Senator Winters gathered her documents, her face calm, her work done.